Good morning, everybody. You are currently listening to a Tall Girls podcast hosted by a tall girl named India. I hope everyone who is listening today is doing super fantastic. Before I get into this episode, I do want to say, make sure you're following me on my socials at a Tall Girls podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest so that you can stay up to date on all of the latest podcast episodes and catch a glimpse of my everyday life. Also, feel free to leave me a review and let me know how tall you are. I'm genuinely curious. Speaking of that, because I say that in every single episode, I'm starting to realize that I tell y'all to put in the reviews how tall you are, but you guys don't even know how tall I am, or may not even know how tall I am. I mean, it's on my social media bios, and when people hit me up in the DMs and ask me how tall I am, or hit me up in the comment section and ask me how tall I am, I tell them how tall I am, but I don't know necessarily if you know how tall I am. And it's so funny to me because when I go through the reviews, yes, I actually read the reviews and thank you so much if you left me a review. When I go through the reviews, I like to compare our heights in a way, not in a weird way, but sometimes I really do think to myself like, how tall are my listeners? How tall are my followers? And if we were to randomly bump into each other, if we were to physically meet each other one day in the streets, you never know, would I be surprised by their height? Like, how would our heights compare? Would I be looking up at them? Would I be looking down at them? Would I be looking at eye level, straight eye to eye? You know what I mean? And I'm just curious, but I'm starting to realize that I don't even tell you guys how tall I am. And this kind of reminds me of the Zoom era in a way. Remember years back when everybody was working remotely, going to school remotely, all that good stuff. And we were all just little boxes on Zoom. So we would just see probably a third or a quarter of our bodies, chest and up. Some people don't even turn their cameras on. So you don't know what they look like, number one. And number two, even if they have their camera on, you can't tell how tall they are. So when you meet these people in person, when you go back to the workplace, or you go back to school, you're like, oh my gosh, you're so much shorter than I thought. Or you're like, oh my gosh, you're much taller than I thought. I actually got the second one a couple times when I went back to school. I think I did a story time on this a long time ago when I took a final in my sophomore year. And one of the people that was in my class, because we had a couple classes together, so he already knew me, he literally yelled at the top of his lungs, like, oh my gosh, you're so much taller than I thought, in front of a whole group of people. I felt really weird when he said that, because it's like, what do you want me to say to that? But that is a prime example of what the Zoom era does to you. So because sometimes I'd be seeing y'all on social media, or you guys see me almost all the time. Hopefully, if you're following me on social media, you're probably thinking to yourself like, oh my gosh, like how tall is this girl? So for reference, I am 5'10" and a half. Maybe I should say that more or not. It's really up to me. It really doesn't matter. Height does not define me, but it is a big part of who I am. So I am 5'10" and a half, and do with that information what you will. But just know that, especially when I'm reading through these reviews, I am shorter than most of y'all. I don't want to say all of y'all, because I think to myself, maybe there was somebody in that review section who said that they were 5'9" or something like that. But I don't want to disappoint myself just in case I find out that there wasn't a person who said that. But most of my reviews are from people who are in the sixes. So I am quite literally shorter than most of you guys, but still tall. Still above average, just on the shorter end of the tall spectrum, I guess. Anyways, moving on, I have a question for you. Have you ever felt dissatisfied with your height? Do you often compare your height to others, but in a bad way? And when I say in a bad way, it's like, oh my gosh, she's so much shorter than me, or he's so much shorter than me. Why can't I be that short? Stuff like that. Not how I described it earlier. Do you ever not feel comfortable in your height, or believe that you should not be at the height you're currently at right now? Okay, that wasn't one question. That was multiple. But if you answered yes to 2 or 3 of those questions, then you have height dysphoria. Let me stop. I'm just kidding. Or am I? Listen, I'm not one to diagnose anybody. I'm not a doctor of any sort. I'm a business student. Don't come for me, please. I cannot diagnose you. You honestly cannot diagnose you. However, this could potentially be a thing. Now, I was scrolling through TikTok, and you know how I post content about being tall girl content, tall girl problems, this, that, and the other. So naturally, my FYP is going to fill up with stuff about being tall. And I happened to stumble upon a video about height dysphoria. And I looked it up on TikTok, and apparently it's used interchangeably with height dysmorphia. So like body dysmorphia, but for height. So height dysphoria, height dysmorphia. I don't know which one is the actual correct term because this is kind of new to me. I just recently found out about this, but I did look into it. And I think that we need to talk about this because is this a problem? Is this something that tall people actually experience? So when I looked it up, I found out, of course, on Google that, on Google, the term is height dysphoria. So I found out that height dysphoria is this idea or sense that your height is wrong, or you are too tall or too short, or you believe that you're too tall or too short. It's almost like body image anxiety, where you feel stressed or anxious or unhappy about how tall or how short you are, or you feel anxious or unhappy about how tall or short you perceive you are. So thinking that you're too tall or too short. When I was scrolling through TikTok, I found that this was very common among trans people. But as I kept scrolling, I found out that it was also kind of common for, a little less common though, but kind of common for tall people in general. And yes, this podcast is surrounded about being tall, but I think that this could potentially be for people of any height. I honestly think that maybe it just depends on how they view themselves, or how they view how they should be or how they should look. But I don't know. Let's kind of unpack this, because looking into this more, I genuinely think that this could be a serious thing. And I feel like there are people out there who believe that feeling self-conscious about your height isn't that serious or isn't that deep. But in reality, it is. Bullying and shaming and traumatic events are often associated with that. So you mean to tell me that those things aren't that serious? I even said in my last episode that people's words tend to hit harder than they think or than they perceive. What could be funny to them or a joke to them could be extremely serious or extremely hurtful to the other person. It honestly makes you feel bad. Now, I'm not saying that those events can potentially lead to you believing that your height isn't where it's supposed to be, or your height wasn't made for you in some type of way. I'm not saying that those things could lead to that. It can, it can't. Everybody's story and everybody's path and everybody's journey is different. But in terms of feeling self-conscious about your height and feeling anxious about it and feeling unhappy about it, those events could potentially lead to that. And on top of that, as a tall girl, it's hard to see other girls around you who are these small, little, tiny people, and you just feel like this big monster who sticks out like a sore thumb, to the point where you actually think about height reduction surgery. Yeah. I was one of those people who thought about height reduction surgery. It's just not a good feeling. That's all I can say. And like I said before with the comments, not just people's words about your height, but then they also like to compare your height. I really don't like it when people tell me, oh my gosh, you make me feel so short. Like, stop. What are you doing? I get it. There's a height difference, but just stop, shut up. Because I already know that I'm tall. Now you're making me feel much bigger than I probably actually am. I know I'm tall. And that's the other thing. I get the comment, you're tall, so much that I'm going to start treating it like a compliment. Like when somebody comes up to me and is like, oh my gosh, you're tall, I'm going to be like, thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm blushing. Stop flirting with me. Because Like, what am I to say about that at this point? People's words, like I said in my last episode, people like to make comments and not think about how the words are going to impact the other person. And it could just be super annoying. The biggest factor in making us feel out of place, making us feel self-conscious about our height is other people's words and comments. They could just make us feel so out of place and so hurt and make us feel anxious about our heights and bad about it. And the clothes don't help in this situation. Did I tell y'all? The other day, I went to the store because I want a new pair of sweatpants and I found a pair fully knowing that it was not gonna fit. But I decided to try them on anyways. And what do you know? When I try them on, they fit like capris. I do this to myself at this point. I disappoint myself. There are a lot of factors that go into making us feel self-conscious about our height. That's the whole point of me rambling, I guess you could say. Well, not rambling, but that's the whole point of me speaking about these things for the past couple of minutes. People's comments and people's words, clothing that doesn't fit us naturally, clothing that's not long enough. And I'm grateful that there are these small businesses out there run by tall women who actually make clothes that fit our length. I'm grateful for that. It's just a lot of things that go into making us feel bad about it. So if you ask me if height dysphoria or height dysmorphia, however you call it, is a thing, I would argue yes. I would argue yes. And I think that the bullying, the shaming, the clothing, the tall girl problems, if you will, can potentially lead to that. But still new to that, don't know everything about it. I'm gonna look more into it. And honestly, I want you guys to let me know, like, do you think that this is an actual thing? Have you heard of it? Do you believe in it? Let me know. Hit me up at a Tall Girls Podcast. DM me. I'm curious to know if you know what this is. Have you heard of it before? If you think that I missed anything about it, please let me know. Educate me, because wow, like, do a lot of tall people suffer from this? Do short people also suffer from this? It's very interesting to me. But thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you. DM me. Let's talk about height dysphoria or dysmorphia or anything that's going on with your life. If you want to talk, just let's talk. I'm down to talk. And yeah, I'm going to end it here. I'll catch you in the next one. Good night and goodbye.